Okay, great. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Mike Dowling. I teach innovation and technology management at the University of Regensburg. At the same time, I lead a think tank here in Munich called the Münchner Kreis, where we deal with various topics around digital transformation. I'm a professor in the Faculty of Business and Economics. I am not a quantum technology expert. So what I'm here to talk is more about the business of quantum. I know a little bit about it, and the little bit I know, I'll share with you. Münchner Kreis, just so you know, is a nonprofit based here in Munich. We put on all sorts of different conferences around a broad variety of topics. You're welcome to take a look at our webpage to see the different things we do. And back in 2018, we organized our first conference on the topic of quantum that was not pushed, but the suggestion came from one of our long-term member companies, IBM of Germany. And as many of you know, IBM, and I'll say some more about IBM in a minute, is still one of the leading companies worldwide in the quantum computing area. And they asked us to put together a conference to look at quantum because the topic was, how far out is quantum? Some people said still 20 years, and other people said maybe 5 years, maybe even closer. And that was the point of this. And I'm not a quantum expert, but I had a very good family connection. My brother, Jonathan Dowling, was a professor of physics at the Louisiana State University. Sadly, he passed away in the COVID epidemic a couple of years ago. But in 2018, he came to Regensburg with the other member companies and brought also, in my red circle here, I'll get to this later, a very important Chinese person, a Professor Peng. Why that's important, I'll get to later. When you pass the slides around, people can watch my brother's talk at our conference. It's up on our YouTube website. While getting ready to give this talk, I found a very interesting newsletter online from an American guy named Luke Lango, who's trying to sell quantum computing stocks. But the newsletter was very interesting because he related this story in this picture, which I then stole from his newsletter. It's a very interesting picture back in 1927 in Brussels at a conference of a bunch of physicists. Most of you will probably recognize Albert Einstein in the middle in the first row. There's only one woman there, that's Marie Curie, but there's a lot of other famous physicists there, Max Bohr, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, etc. There were 29 scientists there, and 17 went on to get a Nobel Prize in physics. And what were they talking about back then? They were talking about quantum mechanics, which back then, a lot of them didn't quite understand. Some of them, Einstein never really believed in. And it wasn't until years later that people like Schrödinger and others really started the ideas of quantum mechanics that have become popular today. And as I said, I'm not a physicist, but I know a little bit. So with really taking a stretch, there's one concept of quantum mechanics that's key to understanding quantum business, in my view. So I will do that. And that's called quantum superposition. Basically, and this comes from this guy's newsletter, but he did it very well. In classical physics, objects are in one place at one time. So you're either here or at home, but not in both places simultaneously. In quantum mechanics, objects or subatomic particles can be in two places simultaneously. Sounds strange. Richard Feynman, one of the fathers of quantum physics, says, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you probably don't. But that's what it is. That a subatomic particle, its true location, can be a possible combination of multiple locations. That is one of the basic fundamental quantum mechanics principles called superposition. And in classical computing, everybody's used to computers to have a 1 or a 0. That's a bit. A qubit, you can have anything in between. So multiple states at the same time. And that phenomenon, if you take advantage of a quantum computer that works with qubits and not with bits, and you write the right kind of software, you can get exponential increases in performance way beyond what classical computers can do today. So this is the summary. A bit is on or off. A qubit uses quantum mechanics. And if you take advantage of that, you can get exponential increases in power over classical computers. My brother, way back in 2005, wrote an article for a physics magazine called Quantum Technology, the Second Quantum Revolution. He realized back at that point in time, and he was a theoretician, he didn't work on experiments, but he realized that if these things came online, that it would have big impacts on the world. And that's what I want to talk about. All of us know that the information age was driven by Moore's Law. Some of them might have seen this. This is the original Moore's Law that I copied from an Intel webpage. And Gordon Moore, way back in 1965, said, or observed from Intel, that the number of transistors that they were able to pack on a chip was doubling about every 2 years. And he predicted in 65 that that would last about 10 years. Well, it's lasted over 50 years and it's still going on. This is how Intel, and this is, again, exponential power improvement. The y-axis is an exponential axis. And over time, we've seen exponential performance improvements using classical notions with chip performance. So that's Moore's Law. Well, my brother, back in 2013, wrote the book in the left-hand corner here, looking at Schrödinger's killer app, the development of the first quantum computer. And he coined the term Moore's Law for quantum computing. And some guy in a magazine called it the Nevin Law, a guy named Nevin. And now it's called the Dowling-Nevin Law. And it basically says the same thing, that the number of qubits over time and the power of qubits is expanding exponentially. We're probably like we were back with chips in the 60s, but exponential goes very fast, very quickly. And if that's happening, then we may be seeing quantum computers not 20 years in the future, maybe 5, maybe less. And this is a chart from the European Quantum Industry Consortium showing tracking over time and physical qubits of quantum computers from a bunch of different companies that are making actual quantum computers. And you see exponential growth in the power of these things. So it suggests that something is real and something is really happening. And what this has led to is a lot of activity in the last 5 years. IBM, as I mentioned, I'll go a bit more in detail, has been the lead in this. They created the first workable quantum computer that they opened to the world anyway. Google has one, but they don't share it with anybody. IBM has a quantum computer that they share with anybody who wants to use it. And it looks like this. This is what it looks like before they put it into a vat of liquid nitrogen, because the current quantum computers have to be cooled to 0 degrees Kelvin in order to work. They're working on other quantum computers that might not have that problem. And what you're seeing is software companies getting into the business. You're seeing applications. BMW has a quantum group thinking about how they could use quantum software and quantum computers to do optimizations of their cars. Quantum computers are going public. Some quantum computing companies are getting extreme valuations and raising lots of venture capital money. And when venture capitalists start chasing these sorts of things, there might be hype and it might be overheated, but it also suggests that there's something there that business people should also be looking at. So IBM, they have over 20 quantum systems in operation. The second one outside of the US was built at IBM headquarters near Stuttgart. It was financed by the state government there. And they've opened their network to almost anybody. If you want to use high-powered, relatively speaking, because they're still preliminary, you have to pay for certain things. But low-powered, anybody can log onto their system and begin to test the software. So they have the second center that they did together with Fraunhofer. They're building one in Tokyo and plan to build more of those around the world. So the big players are playing an important role. Google is one of them, among others. What's interesting, though, are the startups. And one of the most fascinating startups is this one, which started back in 2015 in Maryland, a company called IonQ. And a bunch of IBM people left IBM and are in this startup. One of them here works in Germany for their German headquarters. And they have gotten a lot of money to work on their quantum computer that's supposed to work at room temperature without reducing to 0 degrees Kelvin. They got some startup money, then they got some second seed money, and then, this is very interesting, they used a SPAC. SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company that allows an initial public offering without all of the documentation that you normally have by an initial public offering. Donald Trump uses SPAC to fund his Truth Social network. Somewhat controversial in the US, but it worked. They got, in 2021, over $500 million in funding through this SPAC mechanism. And what INQ wants to do is, you see here, exponential growth. They want to start doing machine learning and then optimization and then working into other areas like chemistry in the next few years. So you can take a look at their website. It's a very interesting company. But there was a lot of hype with INQ. Once they came out, their stock price went up to a total market valuation of $4 billion for this startup that had in 2021, 2 million in sales. So 20 times sales is a big valuation for a startup company. Now, kind of the hype has gone down. Their stock price has fallen to about 5, but they're still a unicorn. And they don't have that many employees, and I don't think they have that much more in sales this year. They're going to report their sales from 2022 fiscal year next week. And there's a lot of other money going in there. INQ, another company in the US called Rigetti, Arkit, D-Wave is a company. They make a thing called the quantum annealer, which some experts say isn't really a quantum computer, but there's money going after these companies. But it's not just in the US. This is an interesting company, half based here in Munich. IQM, it was founded by some Germans and some Finns. Jan Gertz, the CEO, is based here in Munich. They have about 70 employees here, and they're working closely with other developers in Finland. And their idea is to build a quantum computer that you can integrate with a supercomputer. And they've built the first one and have integrated into a supercomputer in Finland. And their second one, called QEXA, was installed this summer here in Munich in Garching at the Technical University and the LMU in the Leibniz Supercomputer Center. It's physically there. I'll show you a picture later. And the idea with the IQM computer is to piggyback a quantum computer with a supercomputer to work in tandem. Because some things a classical computer does better, but for very special problems, you can use the power of a quantum computer, and they have already got a 54-qubit machine. They've got about 140 employees, also got a bunch of seed funding. They've not gone public yet. They just raised, this was just from a couple of days ago, another 128 million. And a lot more other firms are out there doing this sort of stuff. McKinsey is one of the few consulting firms that has really started taking an interest in quantum computing and quantum technologies. They have a whole quantum technology group that includes some PhD physicists that are regularly putting out a quantum computing report now every 6 months. You can find it on their webpage. So I did some screenshots. They argue in the report that the startup activity and investments in quantum computing are going to lead to the development of ecosystems for quantum computing in different areas. And you can see here, a lot is going in, and it's exploded in the last 2 years. The United States has the highest number of startups, and the highest sectors are in the hardware area, but it's going on in Europe and in Asia, and we'll see in a minute. China is making a big push into quantum technology, particularly using state money as opposed to private venture capital. There's a widespread, there's a lot of hardware providers, but there's more software providers, because to make a quantum computer work, you have to have specialized software. And there's firms that are getting started doing that. Some of the cloud computing people like AWS and others are thinking about how to integrate quantum computing into their services. So there are a lot of things going on, plus all of the research institutions. Boston Consulting, this is another look at it. They've looked at what will the use cases be. And quantum computers right now are only workable for very particular kinds of optimization and other types of problems that are not easily solved on a classical computer or take too long. And the thing about quantum computers, you can, when they work, you can do things much, much faster. And Google has already proven that a particular problem that would take years on a classical supercomputer to run, they solved it in minutes on their quantum computer. And those sorts of things could be used for new materials, for simulating drugs to come up with new drugs, for financial services. BMW is looking at to optimize things in the car. Deutsche Telekom is looking at for network optimization, the same with Deutsche Bahn. So there's a lot of different use cases out there. It's still, though, all very preliminary. This is an interesting chart because the Chinese government is investing big time in quantum. If these numbers can be believed, they're spending twice what the total European Union is on public money and 7 times what the US is spending on public money. The US has really lagged in the quantum computing area and is trying to play catch up now to the rest of the world. And you also see when you look at the number of patents that the Chinese are issuing, they're leading in the area of patents in all different quantum technology areas. So China is going to be a player, and it's not just the government, but they're, as it always happens in China, they're cooperating closely with their big players like Alibaba, Tencent, and others. This competition between China, and in this article, it was focusing on the competition between China and the USA. This was the topic of a long Washington Post article back in 2019, and also pointed out that the quantum revolution was coming and saw ahead that the Chinese were going to play a role because they literally are pouring billions in dollars or euros, not billions in RMB, into funding, and both in the research side and also in applications. Trump administration tried to invest more in quantum, and I'll point out in a minute, the Biden administration has started to do even more in that area. But as this was also from the Washington Post, China is outpacing by lots patents in this area. This is the leading guy in China, Professor Yanwei Pan, who has overseen the development of quantum technology in China, in particular quantum communications, which is a sub-area, but an important area. And he's based at the University of Science and Technology. He did his PhD in Vienna. He did his PhD with Professor Anton Zeilinger of Vienna. And those of you who follow the Nobel Prizes, Zeilinger was one of the 3 quantum theorists that are not theorists, excuse me, experimentalists that got the Nobel Prize this year in physics. And Pan is his student, and they cooperate very closely still with each other. My brother John cooperated with Pan and visited him a couple times a year to think up experiments that they could run. And this was an article in Science a few years back. What Pan and his team had been working on is launching a bunch of satellites to develop a quantum communication system protected with quantum cryptography. And again, I'm not a technical expert, but if you have quantum communications that run on quantum principles, the only way to hack into those is if you have a quantum computer. And the quantum computers aren't big enough to hack into those things yet. My brother warned the US Defense Department that he had good relations with, that they should be aware of this. They ignored him. In the meantime, they've put in a fiber optic network between Beijing and Shanghai that runs on quantum technology and is therefore dark as far as trying to read anything that gets out of that. The NSA cannot hack in to this network. And they've developed a bunch of satellites to do the same thing, and have proven that they can send information between Beijing and where Vienna, where Zeilinger is still based. My brother predicted then in this Washington Post article that China was going to go black for government communications using this quantum technology. Hasn't happened yet, but they're working on it. They're working on developing a quantum internet using the same principles that is not readable unless you have a quantum computer. The Biden administration has figured out that this is important. This is from Bloomberg just a couple of weeks ago. And they're, in fact, Biden visited IBM's headquarters and looked at, this is their quantum computer before it gets put into the the vat of liquid nitrogen, and they realize that they need to put more money and to put more attention into this. Did we lose our people, or we know we're still okay? That's fine. And that quantum security is a very big issue that we have to think about. This is very new. Last week, I was reading in the Quantum Technology News a guy from the RAND Corporation that has been studying quantum US-Chinese relations and communications. And he tries to paint a more positive picture, saying, hey, the applications that are possible with quantum computing are not so much military applications, drug discovery, financial, et cetera. That's an area that we can cooperate with the Chinese. What's interesting is the US system is being driven by private venture capital. Here in Europe, it's kind of a mix, and the Chinese system is being driven by public money or government money. So maybe there's a way that cooperation can be fostered. And this guy, this expert, he believes that the Chinese are very far from threatening current encryptions. Other people are less optimistic. Some people in this area are very worried about the possibility of using quantum technology to break current encryption systems. And so the White House last May came out with a national security memorandum about this, trying to recognize the possible problems and the risk to cryptographic systems. And I just underlined this because I thought it was funny that they wanted to maintain their competitive advantage. It is not a competitive advantage. Maybe on the academic side, because there are a lot of academics still publishing, but certainly not on the side in terms of funding and where funding is going. And intelligence officials in the US, there's several documents that you can look up online where they're beginning to realize that this is a potential threat. If a quantum computer is developed before we have post-quantum cryptography things in place, then there are lots of things out there that could be hacked by good folks and bad folks. Of course, we're worried about the bad folks. The only one time I wrote an article together with my brother was this one in CIO Review, where we talked about this exact threat. The public key encryption algorithms that secure most of the data on the internet can be hacked with the quantum computer. It's not happening yet, but there are rumors out there that some bad guys are scanning data for the day that they have a quantum computer and can hack it. Unclear, but companies, we made an argument in this article that companies should start thinking about it, and many are, big banks and others, about what the level of this threat is, and security companies are beginning to develop potential solutions. Just one example, this was from a paper from Investment Monitor last April, pointed out that if you had the right kind of quantum computer, you could potentially break the encryption that includes Bitcoin. And if that were to happen, these guys argued that 1/4 of all the Bitcoins in the world would be vulnerable. And if that happens, that would drive the expected value of Bitcoin close to zero. That's a big thing for anybody who uses cryptocurrencies. We were talking about this. And it's not just a theory, it's possible. Question is how fast, and can we do something to prevent it? The other good news is that we're pretty strong in Europe. When you take all of the academic research in Europe and put them together, they're on par with what's going on in China and what's going on in the US. And the European Union is doing a better job, in my view, than the US government is doing. The European initiative is being run by this Italian guy, Tommaso Carracco, who's based in Germany. He's the director of a quantum institute at the Helmholtz Center near Cologne. He used to be at the University of Ulm and he moved to Cologne. And he leads the European Quantum Initiative. So Europe is doing stuff in this area. They've developed a quantum flagship program, and I'm a member of the academic part of that. And they really are trying to bring together the quantum providers and the quantum users and the academics that are interested in the field, and looking at how to do more research, but also to how to get an industry going. So I think that the European Union has done a relatively good job of gaining into this area and is building up a number of capabilities, and across the entire value chain, we business people would call it, from communications to simulations to sensors. My brother worked for a while on quantum sensing. There are technologies that allow radar to be done using quantum, allowing great performance applications in picking up radar signals. The US Defense Department is very interested in such things for planes and ships, etc. Quantum computing, basic science. One of the biggest problems, though, is that the need for quantum technology and quantum business is outstripping the supply of people that know anything about this. We are not training enough scientists and engineers in quantum things. And there's a lot of stuff that has to be trained. There's a whole range of skills, and we're just now ramping up. The Technical University of Munich has a program. University in Stuttgart has a program with the young quantum scientists, but we don't have enough people that are coming out, and that needs to be really pushed in a big way, because if we don't have enough people, we're not going to be able to continue doing all of these things. But the European Union, with this quantum consortium, has realized that and is pushing it. And some other good news for people based in Bavaria is the strength of Bavaria in quantum computing. It's really become, in my view, the clear center for quantum technologies in Germany. IBM wanted to put its quantum computer in Stuttgart, of course, and the Baden-Württemberg government was happy to help. But if you look at the constellation of things in Munich, the research institutions all around Bavaria, and this was a map that was drawn by Bayern Innovative, that's a kind of an institute that's part of the economic ministry here. The Bavarian government has recognized and is putting resources into quantum things. And in fact, one of the latest good news is the Leibniz Supercomputer Center that I mentioned earlier. They have this first IQM computer that they've already installed. I've seen it. It's up and will be running soon. But the European Union just had a tender to fund an additional quantum computer with 50 million euros, and the competition was won by the Leibniz Rechenzentrum. So a second external quantum computer that gets connected to the supercomputer will be coming online in the next year or so, funded by the European government with the German government and the Bavarian government. This is the IQM computer before they put it into the liquid nitrogen. That's Jan Goertz, who's the German CEO, and Dieter Kranzemüller, who's a professor at the University of Munich, also is a member of my Münchner Kreis and runs our quantum technology interest group. So they together have worked on that, and because of all of the stuff going on here, they were able to win this 50 million euro grant to put in another quantum computer. And they've all joined together now. There's a web page called Munich Quantum Valley, where you find all the people here are doing stuff. It's the companies, it's the professors, and the interested users of these things. So we came, when we did our conference 2018, the consensus view was quantum is not 20 years out, maybe 5, maybe 3, maybe 4. But the first computers are coming online now, and you can use them. And there are also quantum simulators already online where you can simulate what a quantum computer does. And from the positive side, many big companies are beginning to think about how to use them, how to start thinking of applications. That's the positive side. On the other side, in terms of risk to all sorts of security systems, people should start to think about that, because it is a real risk. And I don't know how risky it is and what time frame, but certainly people should not wait until it's here. It'll be too late. Thank you very much for inviting me. If you have any further questions, want a copy of my slides, send me an email. And if you're interested in what we do at the Münchner Kreis, you can send me an email too, or take a look at our webpage. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. That was awesome. Any questions from the podium or from the auditorium? I would get one thing gets into my head when you talked about Bitcoin. You know, there is this treasure hunt for the Satoshi coins. I mean, the founder of Bitcoin, called Satoshi Nakamoto, I think he mined 1 million Bitcoins. So did I understand you right that these 1 million Bitcoins could be hacked in 3 years? That's correct?
That's what the experts say. Again, I'm not, an IT expert, but they're writing about this. And clearly, if a quantum computer of a big enough size, and what's big enough is unclear, but Google claims to have a 100 qubit machine already working. The one here in Munich is a 50 qubit machine. And if that's expanding exponentially, then we're going to have 1,000 qubits soon and 10,000 soon. And then those things could be possible, is my understanding. So, yeah, I would be worried about this if I had a bunch of Bitcoins, which I don't. But I'm more worried about my credit card because, we use public key encryption, all of us, every day for sending our credit card information over the internet. And that's just as easily hackable.
But what should companies do? What should they do?
There are companies offering post-quantum cryptography already. There are ways to protect it. Again, I'm not a technologist, but there are ways to have software solutions, some hardware solutions, to protect against these things. And companies should certainly be thinking about it and investing in resource and investing in people that know something about quantum and beginning to think about, are there systems at risk? And if so, what would they need to do to mitigate it? That would be my advice.
Okay. Great. We have 2 comments in the chat. So one is from Wolfgang Pauler, who has linked an article. We will link this in the show notes and the chat. It is a more alternative, skeptical viewpoint. I don't know, Wolfgang, if you would like to elaborate on that, you can speak up. But I will first take the second question from Eugenio. Can you better explain quantum internet, how it is different from the normal internet?
Oh, again, that's a technological thing, but as far as my brother wrote 2 books, How to Build the Quantum Computer and How to Build the Quantum Internet. I'd recommend his second book. And I understood maybe half of it, but basically it's using quantum principles. It's difficult to do because you have to have repeaters along the way to make it work. But by using quantum principles, it makes communications not hackable or not readable from the outside. Because the minute you try to identify something in the internet because of this superposition problem, it's no longer readable. That's a very layman's explanation. The idea would be is that communications over a quantum internet would be, at least without a quantum computer, completely protected. And that's what he meant about the Chinese internet going dark, and the plan is they believe they want to use it for government communications. Because let's all face it, right now, the NSA or whoever can read probably anything we send over the internet right now, but they wouldn't be able to over a quantum internet.
Yeah, but I mean, politicians, especially worldwide influential politicians, they use secure channels, and they talk very confidential here, and they exchange information. They are sure they should not become public.
Right.
When I understand you, I think everybody, Joe Biden or Donald Trump a few years ago, he should have been more careful with such channels, which he expects to be.
Hillary Clinton in particular, that sunk her campaign because she was using regular emails to send government documents back and forth. Yeah, it's something, I mean, it was no big deal. My brother was a theoretician, but he got a lot of his funding from the NSA because when there's a first computer, the NSA wants to have one, of course, too. So they can continue reading stuff, which they're doing already. So that's the interesting thing.
So, and you elaborated a little bit on China. Should we really be scared of what's going on in China? Because I mean, the figures you said they were really scary when it comes to funding and the amount of money which is spent there in China. And it can be, I mean, in former times, the one who controlled the Second World War and other ways, the one who controls communications controls the world. mean, these figures you showed me sound very scary. What can you a little bit more elaborate on that?
Now, I'm a business person. I think more in terms of the business applications. If quantum technology becomes a real business case, we don't want to have the lead necessarily only going to Alibaba and companies like that. And they're investing big time. And my experience, I spent a lot of time in China before COVID. I don't go there anymore these days. But my experience is, in China, they do a lot of big things, and they're not necessarily as effective as we are, but they're getting better and better. And if you put enough money towards something, you can be effective. And this Professor Pan has shown to be very successful. When my brother told the NSA about his planned satellite network, they said, they'd never get the satellites up. And if they did, they wouldn't work. Well, both were wrong. Their satellites are up there, they're working, they're sent in quantum-based communications all the way to Vienna. I would be more worried about the business implications if we lose a potential technology area to be dominated by the Chinese.
I would put another little bit more skeptical question. So, Wolfgang doesn't speak up yet.
I don't really have the intention to ask a skeptical question. I just wanted to ask if you can give us some examples for real-world applications for the quantum computers. To my knowledge, the quantum computers out there are really just basically demoing the way you can use it, but there are no real applications yet. Or maybe you know more than me, so I would be very happy to learn from you.
We had after the first conference we did in 2018, we did a Zoom-only conference in 2019, a whole day just about quantum applications. So if you send me an email, I can send you a link to the presentations today. There were 10 talks from BASF, the chemical company that's looking on trying to develop new chemical combinations using simulations based on quantum. We had Deutsche Telekom that wants to use it for network optimization. We had BMW that has, as cars become more electronic, the network of all the stuff that goes on in a car becomes more and more complex. And they think they can solve optimization problems better using quantum, either simulators or computers. So there are a lot of big companies that are investing in applications for quantum computers. And, I think they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't see the real potential. Drug discovery is another big one that, with a new medical substance cost on average $1 billion. And, the old way is they just tested lots and lots of different substances till they found something that worked. Now they can simulate potential drugs, and you can do simulations much, much, much faster. I would agree with you, but applications have been identified.
I know that people are looking into these fields to find some applications there, but my question was more, are there some applications that are working now already, especially with the very low power quantum computers with maybe, I think IBM is the one with the most qubits with around 127 or something. So, because my understanding is we need couple of millions of qubits to have a chance to see some of these very complex applications you just mentioned to be realized.
Yeah, again, I'm not a quantum physicist, so I can't answer that question. How many qubits do we need? But I do know that some rudimentary problems are already being done. But I could look those up for you.
Would be great. I'm happy to send you an email. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to.
Yeah. So we have another question from Francesco. Francesco, can you pick up or put your question in the chat?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you something regarding the question of before regarding the internet, the quantum internet, because as I know for now, all modern cryptography system that we are using now are defenseless for quantum computing now, as I know. So the thing that I want to connect is if the standard will become some cryptography system from the connection for quantum computing, right? So I will use a system that in some ways will use a system that cryptography, the the message transmission, or what we want to call with some quantum system. In cybersecurity, they say that anything is not secure because it's just something about time. How much time do I need to break a system? So if the technology of cryptography will become quantum, there will be this law will be also valid or not, because if the standard is quantum, I'll cryptography something with quantum, so I have the technology also to exploit or not. I don't know if I get if my question
I'm not
was
sure I quite understand. Are you asking, with quantum technology, breaking current security codes, or are you sending a message using quantum communications that's protected?
more the second, like if the standard will be quantum cryptography, let me say, the law, like the system will be exploited in much more time now. It still will be valid with quantum or not? Because now
Right.
is how much time do I need to exploit a system?
Right. My understanding is a message sent using quantum technology cannot be read, hacked into by a standard, even a supercomputer, because it would take too long.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any more questions?
Yeah, maybe. So you also mentioned ecosystems that are built around quantum.
Mm-hmm.
Will be leading the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what's happening here in Munich is you have both the two universities that have quantum physicists working on these topics from the physics side. You have the Leibniz Rechenzentrum, that's a joint venture of the LMU and the TU working with the computer thing. You have a lot of the companies around here that want to use it, BMW, for example. And so that's, to me, what an ecosystem is where you have a network of researchers, providers, users, and funding sources. And I think Bavaria, particularly the Munich area, is going to be one, maybe around the IBM computer based in Stuttgart, because they do open it up to other users. And they also have Stuttgart and other universities there. But those are really the only two. ULIC has this European center, and they have also a supercomputer, but as far as I know, no quantum computer yet. So
but in terms of companies that are building applications for that computer.
Well, I think more you trying to take advantage of quantum computing power through software that will come out there. So you have software providers, hardware providers, and application users.
Right. Any more questions? And thank you, Mike. We'll wrap this up.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for your talk. This was awesome. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.